立法會主席。
The President.
Good
morning, members. Committee's stage, we are incorporating 57 heads into the schedule. We're having a debate on this. Earlier, I told members that I have decided that for the remaining procedure regarding Appropriation Bill 2013, we will get this done before we adjourn. Point of order, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to call a quorum call. Members, let me say this once again. In this council meeting, before we adjourn, i.e. before midnight tomorrow, we mean to complete all the remaining procedures for the Appropriation Bill 2013. When this debate is over and done with, we have to vote on the incorporation of 57 heads into the schedule, and then we'll be voting again on the incorporation of the schedule into the bill. And clauses 1 and 2 will be incorporated into the bill. We have to put these to the vote, and then we'll put these to through the third reading. We're going to get this out of the way within these 2 days. Today, due to arrangement for other meetings, we'll adjourn the council at 1 p.m. today to be resumed at 2 p.m. tomorrow afternoon. I monitor the progress of the meeting, and we will seize the time available and get these appropriation bill procedures completed. Mr. Leung Kwok-hung, why do you expect the incorporation to be completed so quickly? Well, this is not an anticipation. This is a decision. All these procedures will have to be completed before we adjourn tomorrow. Mr. Leung. So we will put this to the vote, even if the discussion is not over. Yes, I'm just letting members know how much time we have for debate, and you would organize your thoughts and optimize the time available to you. Mr. Raymond Chen. Chairman, have you decided on when you're going to draw the line? We have to put it to the vote on Tuesday, but what about debating time? I've said that this council meeting will take us to 10 p.m. tomorrow evening, and we should have completed all these procedures. If members maximize the time here, perhaps we can have more time for the next debate. If members want to have a debate for a longer period of time, we'll have to adjust the time accordingly. Ms. Emily Lau, under what chapters and verse in the rules of procedure would you base your decision on? What authority do you have to fix a time for the debate before we move on to the next one? Members, well, I haven't taken any new decision. In the middle part of last week, in my ruling in writing issued to members, I have already taken a decision. Before the 22nd council meeting, we mean to complete all the procedures regarding the appropriation bill, and I said that I believe that this is in line with the basic law and the rules of procedure. And the only possible way forward is to decide on a time frame. We are done with the previous debate. That was completed last week, and there are still remaining procedures that we have to get out of the way. If members maximize the time available for debate, and if you organize your thoughts, there should be sufficient time. Ms. Emily Lau. Chairman, if you feel that you have the authority to decide on when the debate should come to an end, then you will work out the debating time, then I would think that you enjoy really enormous power. Now, you cited the rules of procedure and the basic law and the court ruling that vested you with all this power. You're enjoying enormous power, Mr. Chairman. Well, I don't think that this is an unreasonably reasonable power. As I said in my written ruling, I have to make sure that the Council discharges its function in an effective manner. So in the rules of procedure and in the basic law, I am conferred this power, and this is what I intend to do. I've also asked members for suggestions, and there are other suggestions that were put forward by members, and I don't think that they are feasible or they are not as stipulated in the rules of procedure or the basic law. Mr. Chen, how soon are we going to end this debate? If you cannot say this, how soon are you going to allow us time for debate? As I said during the last round of debate, I would allow a reasonable period of time, but if members feel that they need a little bit more time for debate, I would listen to what members have to say. Last Tuesday, if members remember, I said that the debate should come to an end by 1 p.m. And at noon, I asked how many members would like to speak, and I did allow all the members to speak, and that took us beyond 1 o'clock. Now, the remaining procedures, I've already told you a moment ago, there are some procedures that do not allow any flexibility. Now, there are 57 heads that have to be incorporated into the schedule, and they have to be put to the vote one by one. And at the rate of voting, previously, that would take us 2 hours. So we do need to have 2 hours for the voting process. For the third reading, members are probably aware that under the rules of procedure, the third reading of the appropriation bill will not involve any debate. That would take us a couple of minutes. The only flexibility lies with this debate and also the incorporation of clauses 1 and 2. Now, clauses 1 and 2 are very straightforward in the appropriation bill. Now, how much time do we have or do we need for debate? I'm sure members would look at this with a reasonable attitude. Now, if we cannot complete this round of debate today, tomorrow we may have 1 or 2 hours or extra time for debate, but any longer than that, I think I have to regulate the time. Mr. Chen, well, Chairman, as you said in the closed-door meeting, you have to be appropriate in presiding over the meeting. That the appropriateness would be important. That you decided that 10 p.m. tomorrow would be the absolute deadline for the appropriation bill. How do you square this with the appropriateness argument that you advanced? Well, I've already made very clear about the appropriateness in my written ruling. If members do not agree, well, Chairman, now last time you talked about the speaking time during the closed-door meeting. You explained to us that in relation to our speaking time for the CSAs, you imposed some cap. But here today we are dealing with an incorporation of 57 heads into the schedule. And this is not the same as the CSAs that we debated last time. So in terms of appropriateness, are you going to advance the same argument in taking this decision? Mr. Chen, I've only taken one decision regarding the remaining procedures for the Appropriation Bill 2013. We are going to get these out of the way before we adjourn tomorrow evening. On this basis, I will decide on the way we deal with we handle the meeting. So in terms of appropriateness, I think I have made it clear in my written ruling. If members would like to challenge that, you might wish to do so through various avenues. Mr. Kwok-hing, Chairman, I support and agree with your reasonable and sensible decision, because tomorrow evening would be the 15th day, and that would amount to a waste of taxpayers' dollars to the tune of $45 million. Mr. Kwok-hung. Well, this is no point of order. I think he's really cottoning up to you. I understand that you have taken two decisions. The first and second decisions are intertwined. You've taken the first decision, and that led to your second decision. The appropriateness means that legislative meetings have to be conducted in an effective manner. So one thing led to the other. Is that what you meant? I've made it very clear, Mr. Leung. I've only taken one decision, and that is the 2013 Appropriation Bill should be completed before 10 p.m. tomorrow. So you've taken a decision. Mr. Leung, point of order. Point of order. Mr. Leung Kwok-hung, your point of order. Mr. Leung asked me about what point of order. Can I answer him? Well, you don't have to butt in like this. Everybody will be given fair chances to speak. Mr. Leung Kwok-hung, please do not waste any more of the Council's time. Well, he's interfering with me. Very simply, you talked about appropriateness, and you have to complete the appropriation bill within a reasonable period of time, and that is what you meant by appropriateness. Now we're incorporating the heads, and you impose 10 p.m. tomorrow evening as the deadline, right? Mr. Kwok-him. Chairman. Now you have, I'm not with you. Now you have taken a ruling, Chairman. Are we getting on with the debate where members are aware that I won't engage members in any debate over my ruling? The members talked about the rules of procedure, and I just listened to what they have to say. I think we have to get on with the procedures of the meeting and consider the incorporation of the 57 heads into the schedule. Mr. Leung Kwok-hung, would you like to speak? Mr. Leung, point of order. Your question, Mr. Fernando Cheung? Your mic, please. Chairman, I have to point out that I want to understand your ruling means that at 1 p.m. the following day, we should complete the debate on the CSAs. My understanding at the time was that by 1 p.m. you would put an end to the filibustering, and then we put it to the vote. Regarding the incorporation, we never realized that this incorporation debate would be subject to a time frame. And I think today's announcement would represent the second attempt to end the filibustering. Now, you never showed us any papers. During the closed-door meeting, there was verbal exchange, and I think that you never talked about putting an end to the filibustering in this round of debate. Mr. Cheung, your understanding is erroneous. Logically, why did I mention a time frame for the CSAs? If there is no time frame for the appropriation bill, then it doesn't make sense to put a time frame on the CSAs. I never said that the CSAs would be like the debate back in May last year, which didn't make any sense. Now, the only reason for imposing a time frame on the bill is that we do need a time period to get on with the appropriation bill. You may wish to refer to the written ruling. I've made it very clear. If members feel that I said something else during the appropriation, during the closed-door meeting, I know that some members have got a recording. You might wish to listen back to the audio recording. I think all the points of order are very clear now. So I hope the members will get on with the incorporation of the 57 heads into the schedule. Does any member wish to speak?
Mr. Leung Kwok-hung. Chairman, I speak in opposition to the incorporation of Head 49. That's in relation to Food and Health Bureau, the provision for the FHB. Why? Well, the FHB is a bureau that has the great importance in relation to our food and hygiene. In the past, FHB treated their staff very poorly, leading to a deterioration of food hygiene. So we should deny the incorporation of this head to teach them a lesson. Outsourcing was introduced and promoted by Mr. Chiu-hung and Mr. Liang Kam-chung in the last century. It has been severely criticized. One outsourced staff member got $7 an hour. And as a result, we came up with measures to prevent such exploitation. But under the FHB, outsourcing continues. Improvement to conditions of employment have not improved significantly. And the proportion has gone up to 80% when it comes to the ratio of outsourced contractor employees vis-à-vis other employees in the Bureau. So, as long as the FHB has not been able to improve the outsourcing system so that employees can get better safeguards and protections in a better environment, because if the Bureau doesn't do this, monitoring of the service provision will suffer. And of course, the contractors' employees will not get proper compensation. I'm forbidden to talk about the FHB's policy, so I won't talk about it. Obviously, in terms of FHB policy, what they're doing in the FHB is deviating from modern standards. It seems that they are still lagging behind. They are brought down by 1930s, 1940s standards. They only look at output rather than outcome in assessing the bigger picture. For instance, let's look at the cleansing of wet markets. The indicator is that it must be done 3 times a day. Why 3 times a day? Just like when we ask you why you have to end the filibuster, you come up with a ruling in writing and give it to us. Is that an applause? No. So why? Mr. Ng Leung Sing has been asking me to shut up and sit down. Do I have to heed his advice? Last time, Mr. Mei-fun Kwok complained. Mr. Leung Kwok-hung. He's no shining star, as his name might suggest. He's speaking all the time. What's this? A children's playground? Mr. Leung Kwok-hung, please speak on the subject. I want to lodge a complaint formally. Let me remind members again. members should not, while seated, speak, thus affecting the speeches of other members and officials. If a member wants to speak, he must tell me first, and he can only speak when I give the signal to do so. If a member continues to speak while seated, I'll ask them to leave. I have to apologize to you. It's the sound of a cockroach passing by. Mr. Leung Kwok-hung, you know our policy on speeches. Please don't just say at length, talk at length with regard to one policy or the performance of one particular department. Understood. So they only look at the input and the output and nothing else. Of course, it's not going to get achievement. There's no clear objective, whether you're talking about a service or something to be accomplished. Well, unlike you have a clear objective. You must make sure that this council functions properly, and you have to set a deadline. That's the way when one look at the outcome, not the output. The Audit Commission has published a report on wet markets, pointing out a high vacancy rate. It's a long report. I won't talk about the details. The crux of the matter is whether the FHD has provided the necessary quality service. If we keep cleaning the wet market, would that result in a higher utilization rate of the stores? Obviously not. And the FHD thinks that by relying on an outsourcing system, they will be getting better in terms of cost effectiveness. That's obviously wrong. Therefore, I don't think we should allow the incorporation of the head to give them the budget, the money. I know I shouldn't quote all the instances. I have a long list here with me. One further thing is the demerit point system. And I have something to say about that as well. On the face of it, the demerit point system is fair. You have a penalty. You implement the penalty system, and the consequence of getting demerit points are obvious and transparent. The question is, the FHD's management system is very complicated. Different markets are equipped with different facilities. And if you apply a set of general rules, a general system of punishment that applies to all markets is not desirable. For example, in some wet markets, something would never happen because of a lack of certain facilities. In the market that is close to my home, that's what has happened. The FHD relies on this demerit point system to punish wrongdoers. A factor to be taken into account is the prosecution record of the FHD. I mentioned this time and again. The entire penalty system is not transparent, and the department is also responsible for handling appeals. Mr. Leung Kwok-hung, please do not plan to talk about one department in the 15 minutes allowed. With your clarity of mind, when you want to criticize government departments, it will be equally effective if you do so in the 15-minute speech. please reorganize your points so that you don't have to spend too much time on one particular department. Well, yes, Chairman. Well, you are very smart. My mind is a little bit unclear. I need some time to consider this. I want to invoke the Rule 73. I want to ask for a quorum call so that I've got some time. I can be given some time to consider. Ms. N. Zhang, well, I want to say that under our rules of procedure, I'm talking about Rule 69, Sub-Rule 10. And in this debate, we should be subject to the Rule 68, Bracket 3. And under 68, Bracket 3, the debate shall be confined to the policy of the service and not to do with the details of any item or subhead. I've noticed that some members have really been talking about details of the subheads. Can you ask them not to go into such detailed subheads?
梁國雄議員請繼續發言。
Mr. Leung Kwok-hung, please continue. I will be talking about policies, and I don't want to just speak without reference to any examples, because that would be just nonsense. I was talking about the demerit point system for markets. Of course, such a system may facilitate management, but if the mechanism is not transparent, you may get something opposite to the tenants, the operators. Well, this is a weapon for which there's no defense, and there's no effective appeal available. As for the vacancy rates of markets, as I've said, cleaning the markets regularly will not attract more tenants. It's just a nuisance, and it will just add to the management cost. And as a result, you have to keep the deficit at bay by cutting employees' remunerations. So all markets will either have to be demolished or to make improvements appropriate to the location or to the circumstances. For example, better connectivity be provided, and better facilities be provided to provide a better customer environment. For example, air conditioning. I won't go into details. Suffice it to say that it has been very, very poorly done. Because of these erroneous policies, our public funds are not expended appropriately. Most FEHT markets are well located because they're meant to be convenient to customers. So apart from the affordable prices, the other intended objective is to allow easy accessibility of customers who live close by. If the markets are not well utilized, well, some people think that this is about money not well spent, but it's actually about the deprivation of appropriate services to the intended customers. For a long time, the vacancy rates of FEHT markets could be as high as 30%. And even if the stores are not vacant, they may be used as a warehouse. They're used for storage. FEHT is unable to check against this. There's no policy to prevent this. Well, I have to give an example to illustrate the point. You can ask people to present the license when they carry out the inspections, so that you know that it's the licensee who's operating there. But they are not doing this. So land provided intended was for a certain objective, and the original outcome expected are not realized. You are right. I don't intend to spend all the 15 minutes. My mouth is dry, and I don't want to offend colleagues here. So I will stop here. As regards why we should not incorporate this head for FEHT, I'll pause here. Other members may wish to continue. Ms. Priscilla Leung. Chairman, I support the incorporation of these 57 heads into the budget. We support the incorporation. Doesn't mean that all the departments, all the bureaus have been doing an ideal job in service delivery. But we are against the use of a filibuster to exclude all the heads, because this is counterproductive. It's putting the cart before the horse. Sorry, I didn't clip on the mic. Please continue.
Mr. Chairman, we support the inclusion of the 57 heads. This is not because for each department, for each bureau, we find their performance satisfactory in relation to the expenditure. But then if we are to take out the heads from this year's budget, it is not going to help, and it is putting the cart before the horse. Well, in relation to each bureau, in relation to each department, in relation to each head of expenditure, if we are to talk about the merits of their performance, then in fact we could have followed them up at panel meetings. Say, for example, dental service for the elders, improvements to the drug formulary, 15 years free education, the new DSE, the Housing Department, Housing Authority, keeping ferry service, water quality, liberal studies. I don't think they should be taken up at this stage. For the Education Bureau, even if you are to take out all the expenditure, it means that you are paralyzing the Bureau. There won't be any improvement. And in fact, what you are achieving is that the service will be taken out and just not going to help at all. For the filibustering, well, in fact, many lawmakers have become very tired and we're quite fed up with it. But then what is even more important is that many citizens are being affected. Last week it was mentioned that we pulled our face, we were unhappy. This is because other than discharging our functions as lawmakers, other than speaking on behalf of different citizens here, we still have to go to the people. But then as a result of the filibustering, many citizens have told us and have sent messages to us urging us to stop the filibuster as soon as possible. If we have any views, we can take them up at the panel meetings so that we can seek improvements in the policy address of the coming year. The filibustering means that we are prevented from discharging our duties as electrical members, and that's upset us. And because of the filibustering, the electrical has almost been paralyzed. We are being hijacked, and they have the excuse that we need to have discussion about individual heads so as to seek improvements. But then what they're doing is try to take away the expenditure. But I don't think any reasonable man would disagree that this is not going to help, this is not going to introduce any improvements. I hope members of the public who listen to us will understand that objectors to the filibustering also hope that there will be improvements to the service, but we hope that they can be taken up in the normal way at panel meetings, and then we can have our discussion elsewhere, and the filibustering won't achieve any purpose of improvement. Therefore, Mr. Chairman, in the remaining time, I hope you will enforce the rules of procedures very strictly. I support your effort to stop the filibuster, because in this way, the legislature, the government, and the society can come back to normal operation. If members are unhappy with the ROP, and as a member of the ROP, I also see that there is room for improvement so as to prevent the president giving people the impression that sometimes you are lax, sometimes you are strict. But I don't think we can solve the problem by filibuster. I think it will require the cooperation of the pan-democrats, among other members, to solve the problem within the context of the ROP. Dr. K.K. Kwok. I would like to talk about the procedures. Mr. Chairman, last week you exercised your power. You cut the filibuster. You made a very important point. You said that you were waiting. Now, when you were waiting for public officials to talk to the proponents of the amendments. You were waiting for that moment so that the flawed budget could be fine-tuned. Sorry, Dr. Kwok, to prevent any misunderstanding, I don't think what you said was what I said. Now, I have to point this out. Otherwise, the community would think that I have said that the budget is full of flaws. I did not offend you, Mr. Chairman. You said that I hope officials would talk to the members who proposed the amendments. No, I asked for the public officials to sit down and talk to members who proposed the amendments to talk about that. Well, sorry, Mr. Chairman. This legislature have certain duties to discharge. Now, let's take a look at the public officials. I think they are just perfunctory. In relation to talks with the members who proposed amendments, I think the public officials didn't have any sincerity at all. They tried to appeal to us, to our sensations. They said that some people would not get paid. But in relation to our aspirations regarding the budget, nothing has been done to address the concern. Members who spoke, including Dr. Priscilla Leung, they urged us not to filibuster, saying that we have a more serious duty to discharge. Mr. Chairman, well, I think some members here don't even know the ABC of politics. This has greatly disappointed me. Well, in this legislature, we represent the people. We should exercise our powers and functions so that all the policies introduced by the government, in particular the budget, can really reflect the needs of the government, of the society. Well, in fact, we are duty-bound to move amendments. We have to do this. However, in today's legislature, you see that it is a distorted one. FC members account for half of the membership. We have the split voting system. And as a result, it has weakened our power. When we try to discharge our functions, Dr. Kwok, well, this point has been made time and again here. So please come back to the 57 heads to be included into the schedule. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to that soon. So when members try to move amendments and the inclusion of heads to the budget, I think this is something that we have to address. I would like to say that I oppose the inclusion of Head 21, that's in relation to the expenditure to be incurred by the Executive Council. Well, we've just seen that a heavyweight EXCO member who, during the electioneering period of the CE, headed the CE's election office, namely Mr. Barry Zhang, and there is a scandal. And in fact, I understand that the commodity exchange or the mercantile exchange has to stop. I think this shouldn't have been taken up here. But exactly have we seen that for the new term Executive Council, since its establishment, it has attracted a lot of public attention concerning ethics of the EXCO members, like Mr. Franklin Lam jumping the queue in buying properties or transacting in properties. And now we are attracted to the work of Barry Zhang. He's in possession of confidential information. And in fact, he also sits on 9 very important committees, and he can make decisions which have a lot to do with the interests which are of substantial nature. And we can understand why there's a lot of public attention. For the appointment of EXCO members, quality of the membership, as well as the transparency of EXCO members' work, I think it is it lacks transparent. We have seen political rewards. We have seen cronyism. We cannot tell why certain people are given the job, and as a result, we cannot see how our governance can improve. Therefore, for you to ask the public to agree to the inclusion of the head so that all the members of the EXCO will have their honorarium paid, this is against the public wish, and this is not in line with the public's demands of the EXCO as well as the administration. Next, I want to turn to Head 151, and that's in relation to the Security Bureau as well as 152, the police force. Mr. Chairman, last week, what happened was that a group of students in Chiu-hung were present at a function attended by the CE. Our law enforcement officers handled the unarmed students in the most violent way. And in fact, what they did would affect the reputation of the police force. A male police officer was stopping a female protester in an appropriate way. For the administration, for the Security Bureau and the police force, when the public are trying to assert their rights to peaceful demonstration and assembly, we found that the law enforcement agents have been using force to deal with the protesters. We can agree with the mode of operation. And on this occasion, both the Security Bureau and the police force, when asked for clarification, had come back with a reply which is found to be unacceptable. Clearly, there is a photograph to show and to be shown to the S4S, but he said that that's not evidence. He said that he would like to investigate, to find out about the truth. I don't know what else he has to be told, what else he has to see. Now, in relation to the citizens who watch this on the TV screen, who read it in the newspaper, this is inappropriate conduct in the public. Now, what about the Commissioner for Police? What about the Secretary for Security? They didn't apologize openly. Rather, they said that if you like, you can lodge a complaint and then we will give you the truth. Well, Mr. Chairman, for this sort of attitude, for this sort of approach, we believe that this has brought shame on us. And in fact, for the community in relation to the police force, among other law enforcement agencies, I'm afraid this sort of reply has greatly disappointed us. And in fact, for police officers who called the phone-in programs of the radio, they said that it's outrageous and it is jeopardizing the reputation of the police force. If the S4S cannot deal with the matter fairly, and if the S4S cannot maintain the image of the police force as an impartial police force, it is bad. Not too long ago, there was a member who took part in social movements. I think about 2 years ago, she was suspected to have taken part in an unlawful incident. And then, in fact, in January last year, the SJ made a decision, and it was only this year that there was a reaction. I have to remind you that this is not the occasion to talk about a specific case or a specific incident. If you would like to follow that up, please do it within another context. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I merely want to point out that such incidents mean that for the SB, as this Policy Bureau, and for the police force as an executive department, we have been greatly disappointed. Here we are talking about the expenditure heads. Therefore, we can't agree with what they have done. Yesterday, probably we were talking about land matters, and I'm referring to Head 138, that is the Development Bureau. The Secretary for Development in his blog talked about new ideas. He tried to tell us how reclamation would be the best way and most effective way to go about land uses and that will optimize our land. Well, in fact, we all know that in Hong Kong there is a lot of land which hasn't been put to optimal use. And in today's papers, we have seen that many indigenous villages have the rights to build village houses being abused. And then they were sold to property developers and who made a profit. Now, for the Development Bureau, a lot of land has been reserved for the building of village houses. On the other hand, hundreds of thousands of citizens are waiting for rehousing in public housing. We are waiting for the government to come up with more land to resume the HOS building plan. The administration hasn't done what is required of them, of the administration. Some land has been allowed to lie idle. The administration is still trying to promote ideas like reclamation, which hasn't obtained the support of the public. Now, for reclamation, we are talking about 5 years, 10 years down the road before we can add more land to our land bank. So for the 500,000 people on the waiting list for PRH, does it mean that we have to wait and wait? But this government hasn't got vision. This government is not efficient. Does it mean that we have to wait for the slow process of planning, reclamation, and then construction before they get a roof over their head? If this is really the approach, I think we are not doing justice for those who are inadequately housed, like people living in subdivided flats. The government have certain policies. We're not able to change such policies. And there are also some questions that have been left unanswered. We've been trying to ask why certain land has not been put to optimal use. Mr. Chairman, of course, I know that you have exercised your power to cut the filibuster. The budget will certainly get a plain and smooth sailing, and a lot of the heads of the expenditure will be included, and the budget, the appropriation bill, will certainly be approved with the support of the pro-establishment camp. But then there will be a regret. What is regrettable is that we find the governance is something which is not responsive to public needs. There is division in the society, there is a wealth gap, there are lots of social issues. In fact, we could have used the budget to rectify the wrongs, and yet we are missing this golden opportunity. For the budget before us, we understand that the community has been paying attention to the budget, but I think they are more interested in the filibuster farce. And for the pro-establishment camp, I think some members have come up with ridiculous reactions. Mr. Chairman, probably the appropriation bill, and that is the budget, will be approved eventually. But what happens next is that many issues go unresolved, and the legislators are not able to discharge their functions. So we're being castrated, and the public opinion has been dismissed, and the social policies are not being sort of reflected in the amendments to the budget. However, I believe that each lawmaker will bear in mind our pledge to our constituents, to our voters, and then say what is in our mind, and then express our views concerning the amendments and the budget. I think people know what it is like. Thank you.
I'd like to remind members that the scrutiny of the appropriation bill doesn't mean that we should engage in a debate on public policies in detail. It doesn't mean that we should advance our views regarding the public policies and also put these policies to the vote. We have our obligation to monitor the administration. If we do so like this, then it would not be appropriate because we are focusing our attention on the policies here, and we will not be able to achieve the desired effect. I'd just like to remind members that they're not supposed to repeat all the points already made by the relevant members or other members during the CSA debate, and we should not rehash all the arguments that we advanced during the second reading debate. Mr. Raymond Chen. Chairman, regarding the incorporation of these 57 heads into the schedule, I'd like to speak for the first time. Before I move on to the heads that I have in mind, I'd like to respond to some of the other members. Mr. Priscilla Leung said that the debate at this point in time doesn't make sense. I think your ruling did carry a hidden message in this regard. I think it's better for us to amend the rules of procedure and remove this incorporation stage. Of course, I'm not engaging you, Chairman, in a debate here. Second, in response to Dr. Kwok-hing, Chairman, you have already put an end to the filibustering. We're not having any more filibustering. If you don't want to hear from me or Mr. Leung Kwok-hung, you should press the button to speak till the very end. And you can have the floor till the very end. But you don't. You give up your chance on speaking on the appropriation bill. You want to save your breath. Then you should really listen to us here. Now, what is the point of having a debate here? Of course, I'm not going to repeat the points that are already made at the resumption debate. That the filibustering has been halted, and I've got a lot of things that I meant to say that I haven't been able to say. I think we have to consider what can be said and what cannot be said. Now, with this rotten budget, I call this a cheat budget. Some members said that we don't have sufficient time, that during the Special Finance Committee we have put thousands of questions that are not very clear. Now, Chairman, you cited the number of hours we spent here. I think quantity cannot replace quality here. If you try to sit on the Special Finance Committee meetings, there is nothing that they can answer. In particular, the Security Bureau, they never came up with the statistics. They were not prepared to come up with the statistics. Chairman, I hope that we're delivering quality. I would request a quorum call, Chairman.
陈吉群议员。
Mr. Raymond Chen. Chairman, thank you. I will speak on Head 44, EPD 137, Environment Bureau. I would be speaking on the incorporation of these heads jointly. Head 44, there are 6 areas: waste, air, water, environmental assessment, conservation, and so on. The largest item is obviously waste and air. The highest increase lies in air. I will be talking about this in just a moment. I'd like to mention EIA and planning to start with. There are indeed problems, and also conservation. The proportion of resources devoted to this is really minuscule. EIA and planning, there is an expose recently. This is nothing new, and that is the Long Mei Beach. The Ombudsman has taken on board a complaint. There are 6 departments that are being investigated in relation to the vetting or the approval of the beach for maladministration. I remember the district council was consulted. They've come to the legislative council, and there were consultation in the community, and all these consultations were on the basis of untruthful EIA reports. Now, the statistics or the data regarding this the species were inaccurate. Now, in Program 5, in relation to the EIA and planning, now there is an important item to preserve the sustainability of biodiversity. I'm sure that the people of Hong Kong do have a consensus in this regard. Environmental protection, it doesn't matter whether you're building a bridge, a tunnel, or whatever. If the EIA cannot be endorsed, that they may need to spend double the amount of money, and they may have to redo the EIA, and they have to do all of this. But the EPD refuses to withdraw the permit for this particular project, and pressure was brought to bear on the EPD by the NGOs, and they said that if the government doesn't disclose the justification for not withdrawing the permit, in fact, the chief executive can do something about it. Now, if the EPD doesn't do so, they're going to seek a judicial review. Mr. Chen, please do not belabor the point on one particular issue. Thank you very much, Chairman, for the reminder. Now, from this particular issue, the EPD, the Environment Bureau, here in this particular program, Program 5, they're doing really a horrendous job, and they're falling down on the job, basically. The other thing I'd like to mention regarding the Environment Bureau is the $10 billion spent on the replacement of the diesel fleet for the transport trade. There have been a lot of objections. Environmental or the air pollution is an area that receives a lot of funding injection. There has been an increase of 44.8% in Program 2 dealing with air. We have seen an increase of $44 billion. Now, they're going to spend $10 billion to replace the diesel fleet. Of course, this has met with a strong objection from the community. The FTU said yesterday that the Environment Bureau wasn't really sympathetic to public opinions. The EPD said that there would be fine-tuning. There would be fine-tuning of the compensation rate and so on. But this is not acceptable. in relation to this policy, air pollution and emission reduction and so on, I think that this is something that can be done locally. We cannot do anything about the pollutants drifting across from the mainland because there may be implications on inland relationship. We cannot halt the factory operations there across the boundary. But for the vehicles, the diesel vehicles, why is the EPD wielding its knife on these vehicle owners instead of the bus operators that are washed with cash? They are creating a heavy burden on the drivers. They're talking about a subsidy of 18 to 30%, depending on the ages of the vehicles. Now, for the vehicles that are particularly old, the subsidy would be lower. Now, as you're aware, a vehicle like this would cost you tens of thousands of dollars. Now, I'm talking about these owner-drivers. I'm not talking about the big conglomerates. They find it very difficult to meet the expenditure in this regard. Now, if you look at the statistics, commercial diesel vehicles, the NOx, 15 to 20% emission. Franchise buses, the rate is 40 to 6% NOx, nitrogen oxide. I'm quoting this from Ms. Chen Yunhan's column. So the Environment Bureau is merely seeking results without any regard for the plight of the owner drivers. I mean, I'm objecting to this proposal. The other thing is, and I'll talk about waste, air, noise, water, environmental assessment and planning, and nature conservation in the programs, but there is no mention of light pollution. In recent years, light pollution has become a pretty serious problem. Now we have a working group on the outdoor light pollution. The EPD and the Environment Bureau, I'm reminding them to seek funding there. Now, if they want to take the matter seriously, they should have another program devoted to light pollution instead of just the four areas: waste, air, noise, and water pollution. They should have a separate item for light pollution as well. Now, this is an Environment Bureau. It should not be on the side of the administration. They should not make it easier for the government departments to seek the permits. If I get rid of the Environment Bureau, the government might be on my side because they don't have to deal with all these EIAs, and all the major mega projects can be undertaken quicker than ever. But today we're talking a lot about sustainability of this globe. When it comes to arguments over the EIA, the government should not be coming down hard on us like a ton of bricks. I mean, the government should really do something about the situation. The cost may be high, but I'm sure that Hong Kong people and NGOs that are concerned about the environment will fight a battle with the administration till the very end. Thank you.
Chairman, the first thing that I need to respond to is what the chairman and other members have said. I don't think, Chairman, you are going to stop me. You said we are responsible for monitoring the government, but we should not be talking about policies here. But now we have 57 heads to incorporate into the schedule. All our amendments have been disposed of. So if I don't criticize their policies now, when should I do it? I will not be talking about all of them, but I will be talking about some of them. And what has Ms. Priscilla Leung said? She has reminded One thing, she cooperated with some Pan Democrats in revising the rules of procedure. Well, you can try to move amendments. It would be up to the Committee on Rules of Procedure, and then the proposed amendments would be presented here, and the split voting system would apply. Okay, if you want, try. You can try. Chairman, you have ended one filibuster after another. You are dealing a severe blow to this disgraceful legislature. Mr. Raymond Wong, if you continue to talk about this, I'm not going to allow you to stay. Of course, I won't speak on this. If you say so, I have to say some other things. I have to stay. As I've said, if an evil official is running the government, we are spreading evil. That's what happens. What has happened with the SAR government? Well, what you have said can apply to everyone, including your organization. Correct? Please speak on the heads. Well, please present evidence. If you say that applies to my organizations, now I can adduce my evidence. What I mean, people who are not sincere are now in senior positions. What about Barry Zhang, rather? Please give us your evidence for your allegations. You are not doing your job properly. The SAR government, the small circle election for CE, and the civil service have been plagued by scandals. C.Y. Leung, Mak Chai-kwong, Paul Chan, Timothy Tong, and now Barry Zhang. And the EXCO is so chaotic. That's why I want to cut their funding. What's wrong with that? Mr. Lai Tong-kwok, as Secretary for Security, committed a serious foul play. In other places, such an official would have to resign. I'm talking about Secretary for Security. You agree? And a male Chief Inspector of Police grabs a female protester by her breast. So do you agree that they should be punished? And now with the Lama collision incident report having been published, no one is taking responsibility. And the director of Marine Department is not taking responsibility. So that's what I mean by those who are evil, who are uncivilized, have taken up senior positions. Well, there's been a recent book talking about there's nothing right in the Communist Party, and the Hong Kong Communist Party is also in a mess. According to Rule 68, Bracket 3, a debate on heads incorporation should be confined to the funding for the policy to render the service. Please do not digress. Well, many members have digressed, but it doesn't matter. I can talk about something within the scope of our discussion. EXCO. EXCO's provision is a part of the heads. The funding is part of this, right? You have vetoed our amendments, and now we are against the incorporation of the financial provision. If you look at the list, it's a disgrace. It's shameful. And now Mr. Barry Zhang is so shameless that he has chosen to stay. And it's called the number one of public service appointees. And Mr. Frankie Lam jumped the gun in selling his properties, and he's still an EXCO member. Of course, we would oppose the funding for this EXCO system. Chairman, you were an EXCO member. What's EXCO for? Is this most important decision, the highest decision-making body in the SAR? The EXCO members are just like state councillors in the mainland. They have ethical problems. The members have ethical problems. Also, in relation to the governance of this new term of government, what have they contributed? They have tarnished our image. They have compromised our clean government. How can we allow these people to remain in the EXCO? How can we continue to fund these people's positions? Why can't we cut their pay? Why can't we delete the EXCO? And also, I can continue for another 3 days. And let's look at the CE's office. Look at the kind of people, undesirable elements. Well, I have to thank the chairman for pointing out that we also are regarded as undesirable elements. CE's office is lavishly funded. What have they been doing? The popularity rating of the CE has dropped below 30, a record low. In any civilized society, such a CE would have to step down, chairman. But he is shameless. When he came to our CE's question time, well, he actually smirked and he didn't pay any respect. And he didn't show any sign of self-reflection or awareness of one's own shortcomings. So the SAR government, led by Mr. 689, has got a poor management team at the top, and the tradition of the civil service have borne the brunt. Well, but he was elected through 689 votes. And that's only a small fraction compared with the votes you gathered, you garnished. Mr. Chairman, if we want to improve the system while staying within the system, that's mission impossible. I think Hong Kong people have only got one choice, and that is to come out and protest on the 1st of July. You are digressing, member. With such an SAR government, such a CE, such a CE's office, we cannot agree to provide the financial provision to these people who have made no contribution to Hong Kong whatsoever. We have been talking about Hong Kong's core values. We treasure clean government, freedom of speech, judicial independence. I recently went to a secondary school in Tuen Sui Wai to give a speech precisely on these three subjects. On that day, FS met with the 4 members who were filibustering. I opted to meet secondary students. I'd rather not meet the FS. We don't have a satisfactory democratic system. We want to fight for 100% democracy, 100% freedom of speech. But what we have already got in the past is a clean government, an efficient government. But clean and efficient politics has broken down. Whether we are talking about the committee stage, the vetoing of the committee stage amendments, and the stage we are now in, the incorporation of these heads. We must look at the crux of the matter. Why is it that clean and efficient politics have become impossible, affecting people's livelihood? The Housing Department is now building PLH units promised under Mr. Donald Chiang's administration, and we have hundreds of thousands of people in the queue. The wealth gap is widening. Gini coefficient is ever on the rise, and now we also have a huge fiscal reserve. This budget and last year's budget all have resulted in surpluses. Well, you should have delivered this speech in the resumption of the debate or in the second stage, the second reading stage. Well, we can make up for whatever omissions there might have been in the second reading stage. At this stage of scrutinizing the appropriation bill, and as regards whether certain heads should be incorporated, we can have our views heard, and inevitably we'll have to touch on policies. Mr. Wong, please don't debate with you in this chamber. The highest authority is Mr. Jasper Zhang. We are not going to debate with you on the rules of procedure. Please, if you do not return to the debate on the 57 heads, I'll have to stop you. Okay, I'll take a pause and speak again later. Does any other member wish to speak? Mr. Albert Chan. I'd rise to speak in opposing the incorporation of Head 46 into the schedule. Many people do not understand the consequence of denying certain heads incorporation into schedule. If a head is not incorporated, that is to say the head is not supported, and the funding for that head will be affected. Well, there's an important factor here. Many citizens or members may not fully understand it. My understanding is this. A few days ago, I discussed something with the Treasury, and I confirmed that in respect of the heads, the 57 of heads, if one of them is vetoed or fails to be incorporated, the government would retract the entire budget. So if members can lend us a helping hand, if you're not happy about the budget, and in the second reading and the third reading, if you want to vote against the bill, of course the chances are not high of that being realized. So if you vote against any particular head among these heads, one of them, if you veto one of them, there's a chance that the entire budget will be redrafted. So I hope people will understand that this is important. Through our debate, we may be able to sway some members in their decision. I'll be speaking on a number of heads, and through our speeches, and this chamber is a place where we can give speeches. I hope I will be adopting a rational approach to convince members. I don't think members should just sit there and say nothing. And I'm talking about FEHD's Head 49. Of course, we need to have the FEHD and also to do the job they are doing. If you look at the programs, they are responsible for licensing restaurants, hawker control, and without their work, management of this city would be impossible. But the FEHD's performance track record has been dismal. For example, they victimize street sleepers, they clear away their belongings, including their beddings, and they drove away these street sleepers. And they acted in such a way based on complaints lodged by some people belonging to the major political parties represented here at the expense of human rights. Some power people lodged complaints, and as a result, the department suppressed the disadvantage. We must criticize their doing so. And through our denial of financial provision, we express our disapproval of such action. And also, we are not happy about the management of restaurants and also illegal extensions. When talking about Chun-wans, and we are talking about hundreds of tables and chairs put on the public places and attracting triads to exploit the situation. And the government just let them have their way. There is a total lack of control. The Ombudsman has criticized the FEHD for failing to do its job. We try to write to the health superintendents and to the director of the department, and the director has never replied to us in person. They are very bureaucratic and inflexible. We must criticize the red tape. Legislative members complain to the director, and what they have got is a reply by a staff member. And now the Ombudsman has openly criticized the department for dereliction of duties. So from the districts to the headquarters of the department is only the staging shows for the powerful people, for the senior government officials, such as putting up a show on cleaning Hong Kong by carrying out the logistics and by providing the brooms to the senior officials who try to stage a show. Well, these issues have been around for more than 10 years, and they have become worse. They have become worse. And they would just issue 1 or 2 summons occasionally. And after 10, after 8, the restaurants would do whatever they want. It's just like in 1960s when we had the poor man's nightclub where there was no management. And direction duty on the part of the department is not confined to 1 or 2 districts. It's across the board. We must expose them through this debate. And also we will express our dissatisfaction of the department's work through our votes. Next, I want to talk about Head 156, Education Bureau. There are many problems with the Education Bureau. Well, the Secretary for Education is here. Well, he's number one in terms of the lowest popularity rating is 25%, as low as 25%. It's a 12.5% in July 2017, the net rating. And April 2013 is negative 25%, the lowest among all the Bureau secretaries.
Of course, the national education, that is the brainwashing exercise, attracted the largest number of criticism. At my ward office, I had already put up a banner to oppose national education. The government has already withdrawn it, and so I've taken it down. But then the opposition against national education means that the Education Bureau has given a most negative impression among the members of the community. Now, the Education Bureau has come up with a change in the policy when it comes to national education. But other bureaus are secretly and indirectly promoting national education. So please don't take the matter lightly. Don't think that the Education Bureau has changed the policy about national education and so it has died away. But in fact, the Home Affairs Bureau as well as the Government Information Services have still been planning and carrying out national education-related activities. I want to point out the biggest blunder, and that's in relation to tertiary education. The places at the tertiary institutions have been taken from local students. I would like to share the figures with you. We have got vote planting, and in fact, when it comes to the 150 a day quota for mainlanders to come to Hong Kong, well, this has become a policy, it has become a system to enable migration of the Communist parties to Hong Kong. So it has become a very serious problem because the core values of Hong Kong have been eroded and the population profile has been changed. This is a tactic on the part of the CCP. Let me come back to the figures, Mr. Chairman. For mainlanders studying for the first degree in Hong Kong, the number of students has gone up. 1997, 5. There has been an increase of 900 times because it grew to 4,583 in the year 2011 to 2012. So thanks to the Education Bureau, the tertiary educational sector has become mainlandized, and the number of students has increased by 900 times for the postgraduate school. There has been a change. There has been a growth of 3 times, 280 in the year 1997, now 4,290 in the year 2012. In the past, there were only 882 students from the mainland studying for a postgraduate degree. Now we have seen the figure going up to 3,300 a few years later. And it has gone up to year 2012 to 4,290. Instead of taking up 23%, now it is over 60%. In other words, 2 out of 3 of the postgraduate students are mainlanders. So it's not universities for Hong Kong, because more than 2/3 of the postgraduate places have been taken up by the mainlanders. Less than 1/3 of the places have been given to local students, and yet these tertiary institutions are being funded by local taxpayers. And then there is a professional teachers' website. In the year 2011, there was a survey 1,200 mainlanders who would like to come to Hong Kong to pursue their studies were interviewed. 30% of such mainland students said that they were attracted to come to Hong Kong to study because upon graduation they could remain in Hong Kong to work. 27% frankly said that they would like to get residency status in Hong Kong through such a route. It is not uncommon. When I went to Canada on a student visa, eventually I got the resident status, but then of course later on I gave up my Canadian nationality when I stood for the election. Now it is not surprising for mainland students to want to do this, but what is strange is the reaction of the Hong Kong government and ways to control tertiary students in relation to their admission and enrollment policies on the part of the universities. Therefore, for the figures before us, so what for whom are our universities built? For whom are the tertiary education sector being developed? We are spending public money. For whom we spend the money? For the mainlanders, of course, they pay a different amount of tuition fees when compared with Hong Kong students. There is still a lot of indirect subsidies. 2/3 of the postgraduate places are taken up by the mainlanders. In other words, local students stand a slimmer chance to get a place in the postgraduate education. And therefore, based on this reason, our appeal to members to do the following. We are dissatisfied with the education policy, and in relation to the Secretary for Education, he has committed many mistakes. And I will urge members, when we come to this particular head, please vote against its inclusion. Later on, I will also talk about other heads of expenditure. Just now, I talked about the case of the Food and Health Bureau as well as the Education Bureau. So for these two heads, please at least vote against the inclusion of one of the two heads. So please vote against the inclusion of such heads of expenditure. Mr. Leung Kwok-hung. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I speak in opposition to the inclusion of Head 21, which is about the office of the Chief Executive. Of course, a lot is being included in the CE's office because it is indeed a very big department. So when we moved the amendments, a lot of us were not able to finish what we had wanted to say. I oppose the inclusion of this head based on a number of reasons. First of all, the mistakes committed by the CE, the appointments made by the CE. Well, the CE is the head of the government. Whether he is elected or not, I think for any head of government cannot be otherwise than being flawless. Mr. Chairman, we need to look at the background of the case. Chairman, I think you recall that it is a matter of policies. When the CE declares his interest, there is a particular policy. Other things that he can avoid not declaring about them. I asked him about a BVI company. I asked him about the business of that company, and I also asked him about the management. I asked him that question around about January, and he has been voted into the office for 10 months. Please don't talk about that. But then this is the policy. This point has been made before. No, I haven't. Please do not repeat. Well, the policy is for the head of a government. Will he be drawing up rules to control himself, to regulate himself? He's supposed to set an example. Well, just like the case of Timothy Tong. Can we expect him when he's in office to drop rules to make sure that what he's doing, what he did was transparent so that he was beyond all criticism. Now we are being asked to approve the expenditure of the Xi's office. This is a huge machinery. It is something that is automatic. It seems that you press the button and it will get it. Now, we have got the hardware, but what about the software? Is it being supported by the appropriate software? I think this is the policy that I want to talk about. Let me just set aside the BBY company. Let's set aside common sense. But then in globalization, when we have globalized world, can we simply say that a company is not having business in Hong Kong and so it does not have to be included? Well, if you don't set an example, how can you expect your subordinates to do the right thing? Now, his top 8, Barry Zhang, is supposed to command respect from all over the world. Now, we have got it. It doesn't matter if somebody has a business failure. Many people have business failures. But what about the poor accounts? Well, if he said that he asked Mr. Chiu-hung to lend him a few $1 million, yes, he admitted it, but he said that he didn't have to disclose information about others. So without a good example at the top, no one would be following the rules in relation to his subordinates. If you don't have rules, how can you regulate? If you don't do it yourself, how can you expect your appointees to do it? Mr. Chairman, well, we have to do some soul searching. If C.Y. Leung owes a particular bank billions of dollars, would he have got the chance to be the CE? Well, in terms of the political or the protocol ranking, legislators rank 9th. For those who rank above us in terms of the protocol ranking, they are subject to less stringent rules. Now, if I should go into bankruptcy, it is an automatic case. I would have to be evicted. Now, if you press the button and ask me to repay the cost, then I will go bankrupt and then I have to be evicted. Now, they have substantive powers. We are supposed to monitor them. But then we are behind them. We have this trickle-down effect. Some powers have been trickled down to us. If we can say no to the request for funding, but they make all the decisions as to how money is to be spent. Is it fair? Now, this is about ethics. This is about morality. If they are not ethical, then they cannot rule the others. Franklin Lam, Barry Zhang, well, they are above us in the hierarchy. They are almost above you, Mr. Zhang. But do they enjoy privileges? When we have integrity problems, when we have conflict of interest, we have to leave automatically. But they don't even need to declare. Mr. Leung, I think you are repeating yourself. No, I'm not. In fact, I should have raised this point much earlier. When I said that there might be conflict of interest, there might be business failures on the part of Barry Zhang, and Zhang stopped me. So they knew it in advance. So did anybody lend money to Barry Zhang? Mr. Chairman, it's a question of inbreeding. He has a lot of property officers. He had the Russell. And he borrowed money. Perhaps if he didn't borrow money, he couldn't have the chance to do any business. Mr. Leung, you're repeating yourself. I've already reminded you not to be too tedious, to dwell on one particular incident, one particular example, one particular person. Yes, your point is taken. Well, if the faithful is talking about the first of the 10 commandments and you ask him not to go to the second commandment, is that similar to that? Well, there's no integrity. But then he's supposed to be accountable to the public and he can decide on how public money is to be spent. There isn't a system to allow the community to monitor him. Are we expected to pay him, to give him money? you are still on the first commandment. Yes, I move on to the second commandment. I don't think God will have the 10 commandments which he himself cannot obey or follow. So when God declares that there are 10 commandments, well, in fact, according to the Bible, we are given what the ethics are like. That's how I read the mythology. You are digressing, Mr. Leung. When C.Y. Leung, well, it's not God, it's Moses. When Moses led the people, the Israelites, from Egypt, a policy was made. That is how the food should be sort of distributed. But then I don't think he could have led the people out of Egypt and cross the Red Sea if he didn't lay down a rule to say how food should be distributed. Now, the corrupt officials can easily get the corrupt money. Now, we are talking about $50 billion. The grassroots would like to get $50 billion to do this and that, and they say no to us. But what about the CE's office? Well, it's supposed to be whiter than white, and yet it's very dirty. It's full of lots of problems. Well, if we look at the ranking table, if we look at the table of precedence, Mr. Chairman, now the CE is not going to make a rule to bind himself. He's not going to make the rules to set the ethical requirements. Before he can do that, we mustn't allow him to be well-fed. That means he shouldn't get the money and he should be locked up to think about his mistakes. I think we need to humiliate them before they know it. Now, Mr. Chairman, if members think that we should condone this sort of behavior, we should allow them to get more money, then please tell me. Now, the CE is supposed to take the powers from the CPG, and under him, he has a lot of royalists. He has a lot of pro-establishment camp members. Now, the CE, well, if he can't make policies, if he can't supervise and regulate his subordinates, well, you're repeating yourself. Well, let me say it this way. The CE has not committed a fatal sin because everybody has the survival right, but he can be made to suffer from hunger. Now, royalists, now I am asking for a reduction in the expenditure of his office. Don't you think that it is right? Don't you think that when somebody is being locked up to do some soul searching, he should stay away from meat and he shouldn't be given a full meal? Mr. Chairman, every time when the CE encounters, let me not dwell on specific incidents, but when the CE encounters an incident, if it shows that he should improve and reform his system, and if he does nothing about it, if that incident allows him to abuse the power, he should have done something about it. It's really bad. He has powers, but he doesn't use it. If he has the powers and he abuses it, then he is protecting his own interests. So I'm not repeating myself. So this is the 11th symptom of the Parkinson's disease. So we have been told that if you suffer from 10 symptoms, you would certainly die. But then if you are shameless, then you will certainly survive. If you're shameless, then what can I do? If being shameless, then it will be the saving medicine. If we don't talk about Barry Jenk's case today, then it is not the legislative council, and we are not fighting for the interests of the people of Hong Kong. Does any other member wish to speak? Mr. Raymond Chen, I'd like to call for a quorum count.
周了嗎？陳志全議員，你是否要發言
Mr. Raymond Chan. Chairman, thank you. I'm speaking on 194 about the Water Supplies Department. During the CSA debate, I moved 6 items of CSAs to slash the funding for the Water Supplies Department. One of the key controversial issues is the acquisition of the Dongjiang water. At the panel meetings, we did have a fair amount of arguments. Many people in Hong Kong and across the boundary seem to have the misconception that the Dongjiang water supply is benefiting Hong Kong. Now, I don't think this is the case. This is a commercial deal, not benefiting Hong Kong. I cast out on the pricing. I cast out on the way in which Dongjiang water was supplied to Hong Kong. Now, there is no meter about the supply. There is a fixed quantity to be procured, and if we do not use up the water, we still have to purchase the fixed quantity. I did raise a lot of doubts about this. Also, in terms of pricing, the Water Supplies Department should be negotiating for a better deal for Hong Kong. But the Water Supplies never did anything in this direction. I don't propose to cite detailed statistics. All I want to say is that the budget for acquisition of water supply for Hong Kong is $3.78 billion. It is getting more expensive year on year. Now, the Water Supplies Department said that they have to take into account the piping and all the rest of it. Now, if you're not a smarter businessman, then I can be critical of you, but I won't slash all the funding. But if the Water Supplies Department is really offering higher prices, then they should, and then this is not good enough. I mean, in the commercial deal, we have to fight for a better deal for ourselves. But the Water Supplies Department seems to be an apologist for the mainland counterpart. Now, I'm not talking about this today. I'm talking about the water quality here. The Dongjiang water is going up year on year in prices, but the quality is something that fills us with extreme concerns. A couple of weeks ago, there were headlines like the Dongjiang water is polluted. There was a newspaper that sponsored a survey. I think it is fair. They started with the source of the Dongjiang, and they found that the heavy metal concentration is higher than the mainland standard, which is 60%. They also collected samples from the reservoir, and the turbidity is actually worse than what is accepted by the WHO. They collected samples from the households at Lam Tin. They looked at They inspected the sources of the Dongjiang River. Further down the stream, the river was strewn with dead turtles and fish and rubbish and so on. The media are very concerned about this. Take this year, January, for instance. At He-yuan, it was found that the pollutants or chemicals were pumped into the Dongjiang, and a lot of animals, a lot of fish and frogs were killed. And it was also found last year that the river was strewn with plastic bags and wrapping for fertilizers and rubbish and so on. August 2011, in Yunnan, there was a petrochemical factory that disposed of the chemicals into the river, and a lot of trees were killed and livestock were killed, and the authorities discharged the chemicals into the Dongjiang River. I won't read on because otherwise the chairman would be saying that I am going off a tangent. That according to reports, 70% of the water in the Dongjiang River is polluted. This is very serious. Not only is it detrimental to ourselves, it is also detrimental to our younger generation. Now, the WSD has the water quality scheme at Tai-yuan pumping station. The heavy metal concentration 0.48 per liter, which is higher than the 0.38 in the mainland standard by 60%, and this is also higher than what is accepted by the WHO in terms of heavy metal. I mean, the list goes on. If you look at the WSD's spokesman's reply, the spokesman said that the WHO drinking water, potable water standard doesn't apply to the water at source. And the standard doesn't specify the iron content and the turbidity. So effectively, he's saying that if this is not regulated, then it doesn't matter whether the water exceeds the standard. Now, even if this is polluted water, they don't care. Now, if I have a super effective purifier, and I scoop up some polluted water from the gutter, I purify it, and I hand it over to you to drink, would you be prepared to drink it? The Water Supplies Department said it doesn't matter even the sources are heavily polluted. They have this purification which will make the water okay to drink. And he said that the water treatment works would treat the water and deal with all these pollutants in the water. And they keep the Dongjiang water under close supervision to make sure that the water is in keeping with the national standard. Now, he's citing the national standard, but there are problems. Do we have any problems? Are we beset with any problems? Or is it the case that as long as they can treat the water properly, it doesn't matter what the water, where the water came from, sewage, polluted water, whatever, as long as it is treated, it would be fit for human consumption? Is this the principle that they adopt? This is a department that is in charge of the quality of the water in Hong Kong. That the turbidity of the water represents the sediments and the concentration of pollutants. It doesn't mean that the treatment works and we'll be able to treat the water properly. There are certain microorganisms that cannot be removed through the process, and that there may be bugs or bacteria that may slip through the system. With the turbidity of the water, despite the purification and treatment, it will not treat the water properly, and it may cause gastroenteritis for the drinkers of the water.
But don't do it in Hong Kong. Having heard such reports, well, you cannot trust the WSD, and also you cannot trust the copper pipes used in households, leading to the heavy metal contents in potable water. That's another story, but this is bad for the elderly and also for people who are physically vulnerable. So I want to speak in opposition to the incorporation of Head 194. WSD and the water is supplies are subject to regulation by the Development Bureau. That's why I want to turn to Head 138, the incorporation of Head 138 in relation to planning branch, and also the another head concerning Lands Department. Dr. Kwok-hung have spoken on this, and that is the illegal transfer of the right to build small houses. It has been exposed by the press that indigenous villages have illegally sold off their right to build small houses to developers. This is nothing new. The department just turn a blind eye to this. Or there are so many cases that they cannot cope. That's why we have been allowing this to happen. We have been allowing the developers to reap profits out of this. In 2002, the Audit Commission exposed this. The Lands Department was asked to investigate into the fraudulent practice of selling the small house rights, and also the reaping of profits arising from sale of small houses once completed. So Head 138, Lands Department, for 2013-2014, there are 22 items that they need to pay particular attention. Only one of them with 12 Chinese characters talk about this. That is to continue to review the anti-small house policy. We know no one dares to touch the small house policy. Whoever who tries to do this will die. It's difficult to have a complete overhaul. But now we are told that there are people breaking the law and you have failed to enforce the law. There's no excuse for that. Actually, the Court of Appeal once said that the agreement between the villager and the developer in regard to the sale of development rights of small house is illegal. The Lands Department did not contend that. The Audit Commission criticized the Lands Department. That's in 2002. We are now in 2013, so more than 10 years ago. And we have more and more cases of small houses turned into the housing estate or into the ordinary houses. We believe the government has turned a blind eye to this and let them happen. The invisible hand of the market would see to it as long as the government doesn't intervene. There's no controversy. The parties can just come to an agreement. For those of us like me who wouldn't have any of it would talk about the illegal sale of small house development rights to developers. I will let the Lands Department to come up with a response. According to the Lands Department, in order to implement the 2002 recommendations of Audit Commission, but there's a guarantee clause in the application approval, and that is the villager will have to promise that the right will not be transferred to another party. If there's a breach, the Lands Department would conduct investigation and, if necessary, consult seek legal advice and take appropriate action. And they have told us that they have done a lot in the past 3 years. Altogether, 14 cases were handled regarding illegal transfer of small house rights. And they received 14 complaints. And on average, they handle 5 cases a year. Of course, there are always a black sheet in the frog, so that we cannot expect a perfect record. So 5 cases a year. Would the audit commission find this acceptable? Of course, we cannot just say that it's acceptable by just looking at the figures. Mr. Leung Kwok-hung, may I remind you not to speak while you are seated. Dr. Fernando Zhang, I want to talk about Head 156, Education Bureau. I want to talk about my concern. Today's Ming-Pao reports that according to the guide to secondary schools, they conducted a survey among 519 secondary schools. Only something like over 60% have complied with the requirements of the Bureau under the integrated education, and that is 10% of the teachers would have received special training for 30 hours. That is unacceptable. Under the policy of integrated education, all schools have to accept students with special educational needs. And this policy applies to primary and secondary schools. When they receive an application from so-called SEN students, they will have to accept it. And under this policy, at least 10% of their teachers will receive the basic training. But 190 out of the 519 have failed to make this mark. 65% came up with 0%. That is to say, no teacher in those schools has received 30 hours of basic training to handle or to educate SEN students. Yes? Mr. Albert Chan, I hope more members can be here to listen to Dr. Fernando Zhang. Dr. Zhang, please be seated.
Chiu-hung 議員。
Dr. Fernando Cheung. Thank you, Chairman. I'll continue with Head 156, the incorporation of the head for the Education Bureau. Please don't just speak on one issue. I'll be talking about others as well. We have learned from a Ming-Pao report that more than a third of our secondary schools have failed to meet the basic requirements on integrated education, i.e., under the government policy, at least 10% of the teachers must have received 30 hours of training. And these schools have failed to make this mark. So we wonder whether the education is capable or determined to implement the policy on integrated education. 65 schools have no training who have received the training, 0%. Many of these are DSS elite schools, LaSalle, Singapore co-educational school. Many of our members here graduated from such schools. Why is it that so few of these DSS and elite schools have fulfilled this requirement? Is it because of the lack of resources or what? Under our education system, examination means everything. These so-called Band 1 schools do not like to admit students with special educational needs.
For such special educational needs students, SEN students, they encounter certain difficulties. They may be impaired visually or in terms of hearing, or they have physical impairment, or they suffer from some emotional problems, or they have difficulties in communicating with others. Some of them may have an appearance like anybody else, but they may have learning difficulties. Say, for example, for such SEN students, they are always regarded as being lazy or uncooperative. But in fact, they are being affected by some learning difficulties or other impairment. So without training, you really don't know how to teach such children or handle them, because in the learning process and in the assessment process, students with special educational needs have to be given some sort of adaptive arrangements. If not, then they will be regarded as somebody disrupting the order, non-obedient, destructive, lazy, stupid, etc. And then if they remain in this system like that, they will be regarded as failures. Mr. Zheng, I understand your point about integrated education, but I think your point has been fully played out. What I want to say is that, Mr. Chairman, if we allow the Education Bureau to get the money, are we sure that they can really implement the spirit of integrated education in its policy? Otherwise, we are wasting a lot of human resources. We're wasting human talents. Well, in fact, in overseas studies, half of those who are in jail suffer from some learning difficulties to various extent. This is most regrettable. We don't want to throw them to waste their lives, to waste their time. In overseas countries, there are well-known people. One of them, Richard Branson, you know that he's the founder and chairman of Virgin Air. And he has set up 400 plus companies. He's most successful as a businessman, but he did suffer from learning difficulties. If the educational system made him into a failure, then probably he would find himself being locked up in a jail. Therefore, integrated education is a very important policy. We can't take it lightly. We always say that in livelihood issues, none of it would be regarded as insignificant. For every student, for every child, we hope that by using our public money, by working through the Education Bureau, we can monitor and make sure that the schools can nurture such children. We don't just ask them to sit together with other children. We won't and we shouldn't let them suffer from different kinds of problems and then point an accusing fingers at them and say that they are failures. For integrated education, the current education policy is that it should be a whole school approach. Everybody will participate. In other words, it is not the business of one or two persons, but the business of the entire school. But what happens is that no one takes responsibility. ASEAN students just get placed into any class, but then they have different degrees of problems. Now, the policy says that schools should have open arms towards everybody. But what is the outcome? Of course not. Band 1 schools say no. For direct subsidy schools, they don't get asked to do this. So for schools that do accept ASEAN students, maybe traditionally their school sponsoring bodies have been enrolling such students, or other schools which have always specialized in taking on more visually impaired students or hearing impaired students, but they are the minority. I think your point has been made clear. As I have emphasized, we shouldn't turn this debate into a debate of a particular public policy. Mr. Chairman, I do understand. However, I have to point out that if today we can't monitor the Education Bureau well, if we don't take this opportunity, if we don't express our opinions on this occasion, I'm afraid that after we've given the green light, the Education Bureau would just go back to the old days, and then they would just adhere to what they call the established policy, and will still talk about school-based policies, whole school participation, and they will just do a sloppy job. Mr. Chairman, well, to be frank, given this sort of approach, there's no way we can monitor the schools. They're given a free hand. There are so many schools enrolling different kinds of ASEAN students. They have different kinds of impairment, different kinds of difficulties. They just can't cope with it. Competition is so keen. Band 1 schools have a choice. Band 2 schools are not willing to take on such students because they're afraid that the overall performance would be affected negatively. As a result, most of them found themselves in Band 3 schools because Band 3 schools are faced with the threat of closure because of the drop in student population. So they won't have a choice. And this is most unhealthy for schools that would like to focus or specialize in dealing with ASEAN students. They are not able to cope with it. Given the current system, after a student has been assessed, then they at most get $10,000 per student. And then there is a cap. For this year's policy address, it seems that they are doing a very dangerous thing, raising it from $1 million to $1.5 million per school. Few schools can really benefit from it because it is the cap for the reimbursements. Dr. Fernando Zhang, I must remind you that we mustn't have a very detailed discussion of a particular public policy. As you have said, even after we're finished with the appropriation bill, we cannot shirk the responsibility of monitoring the performance of different government departments. We need to go on with it. Therefore, please do not turn the discussion of the inclusion of such heads of expenditure into a debate of a specific topic. No, I won't just talk about one particular head. Please organize your speech and make good use of your speaking time. Mr. Chairman, of course, we'll continue to monitor the government in terms of education as well as other areas of policy. Integrated education is one of the educational policies. Mr. Chairman, if you time and again think that I'm too focused on one particular point, I just want to make one specific point. Since the handover for 15, 16 years, for our integrated education, it hasn't been reviewed at all. The Education Bureau has not carried out a serious and comprehensive review of integrated education. So I really hope that the Education Bureau will take the matter seriously. Reviewing integrated education, in fact, has been included in the CE's election manifesto. I think he hasn't honored this pledge. Now a word about special education. Again, I don't want to go into lengthy details. Today, as a result of the high unit cost, when compared with the unit cost for ordinary primary or secondary schools, generally speaking, we are talking about 4 times the unit cost of ordinary secondary or primary schools. Therefore, we can see that as far as special education is concerned, the attitude of the Education Bureau is trying to scale it down as much as possible. Many students who have special education needs will be persuaded to go to mainstream schools. So there are fewer and fewer special schools. For schools for the hearing impaired, the number has been dwindled down to 1 only. Now, let's not talk about software. Let's focus more on hardware now. Now, for the special schools, at least 5 such schools have problems with school buildings. 1 in Tuen Mun, another 1 in Li-chang-ok. They are still being accommodated in a school building that has a 50 years history, no improvements inside, and they are serving seriously impaired students. Over 80% of the students are wheelchair bound. But when you go inside, you have to take the stairs to go to the school building, which is 2 or 3 stories up. So they have a lift which has been converted. It's so small that it can barely accept 1 wheelchair. Should there be a fire, it could be disastrous. Again, you're going into the details of a particular area. Mr. Chairman, I really have a lot to say. Imagine putting yourself in my shoes. If you really want to think about the well-being of the students, if you see how indifferent they are, you will agree with me that they are dragging their feet. For this school in Li-chang-ok, when I was the lawmaker last time, I already took on this case. So I have had this case for 8 years, no improvement at all. Yes, I understand. Had I been in your shoes, I would also I wouldn't give up. But I would know that for the appropriation bill, I should spend my time wisely, and I'll try to say what I need to say within the speaking time limit. So if you want to speak again, let me remind you, please don't dwell tediously on one particular case. Mr. Chairman, I would like to continue. I think I still a minute or so left. Other than that, I'm also dealing with other schools, like the one under Hongqi Association, etc. They all have problems with the school campuses. I won't go into the details of individual schools, but just let me cite one particular example, which is for mildly intellectually impaired. They have 1,900 meters squares. Another school also run by Hongqi, also in Tuen Mun. They have 11 classes, 173 students mildly retarded. They have 4,000 meters square. In other words, a difference of 4 times. So for the first school, they are operating from substandard campus, and yet the Education Bureau just allowed this to happen. Mr. Kwok-hung, when we talk about the Education Bureau, of course, you just really can't exhaust the list. I think they have committed so many sins that not even the water from the East Ocean can wash it. Now, Mr. Ng, we don't know what the performance of the stock market is like today. Leung Kwok-hung, please do not digress. Point taken, Mr. Chairman. The Education Bureau, it has seen a number of different policy secretaries. If we take a vertical comparison, well, the chair would say that I'm going into a lot of details, but in fact it's not. You're already speaking for the 4th time. Please do not say anything which is irrelevant to the topic. Well, either you focus on the quantity or you focus on the quality. Mr. Chairman, you need to understand one point. For education, I think all chief executives have regarded it as something of top priority. Chi-chuen set up 3 commissions. There was one to look at the reform of education. So we spent a lot of public money, we spent a lot of time working on the education reform. Of course, the incumbent secretary doesn't have to take personal responsibility of the sins committed by his predecessors. Now, today, we object to the head to be included. So, in plain words, it means that we don't want to give you the money. Dr. Fernando Cheung named a number of schools. Of course, he can't do that. But what is the policy? Probably you don't know, Mr. Chairman. What's the policy? Now, the Education Bureau thinks that as long as a school campus can still make do, the Education Bureau thinks that if you haven't reached a particular stage, then you have to count on your luck before you can get a new school building or get relocated to another campus. That's the crux of the matter. It takes time to educate. If the seedling doesn't get a good environment and there is some inborn weakness, and yet you're still telling the seedling that if you're not up to my standards, you're not going to get help from me. Mr. Chairman, Confucius has said that we shouldn't distinguish among the students. Everybody should be given education, but we also have to tailor-make the educational work. I think it is irrelevant. Please come back to the topic. I think it's relevant. This is because, according to their calculations, they're saying that if there are two schools, now the officials under the Education Bureau say that if the 2 schools can be merged, then you wait for the time of merger. If you think that it's not all right, count yourself being unlucky, because the Education Bureau has got its own systems. I've said many times. I've also said many times that you mustn't repeat yourself. Mr. Chairman, you haven't heard me say this. Mr. Chairman, I made it many times. That is, you mustn't rule me out of order for no reason. Now, there is a policy. The policy must have a specific aim. If the policy objective is to enable students who are born with certain impairment or weakness to enjoy equal educational opportunities, then it means that you can't rely on input and output as your indicators. So it's a policy matter. It can be resolved. All that has to be done is for Eddie Ng to go back and have meetings with his colleagues, and then have a meeting with John Zhang, and then have a meeting with Carrie Lam, so that you decide to change the objective of your policies. That is, we aren't talking about equal opportunities in the usual sense. We have to target at the disadvantaged group so that they get more resources, so that they are truly equal with others. So is it still a policy issue? Have I gone into the details? No, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Leung, this policy issue. What is the relevance with the expenditure amount of this head? For those who are not capable, should receive a pay cut. I've already said that, and during the policy debate, I already said that if you would like to cut the pay of a particular officer or official or cut expenditure of a department, you shouldn't talk about the loopholes and mistakes of a government department. You shouldn't cite that as a reason, but you may refer to the performance of such officials or departments, but you shouldn't turn it into a discussion of the policy. Otherwise, if you have your views on certain policies and if you say that that becomes a justification for the cutting of the pay of an official or department, I'm afraid this is not the approach that we should adopt for the appropriation bill. So please come back to the amount of money given under this head. Please justify why this cash shouldn't be included in the schedule.
Chairman, I understand your point. If a policy is flawed and you're not doing anything to change it, should we still be in this position? Everybody knows that you have to do it that way. You're not doing it that way, and you are committing a dereliction of duty. Well, your point is well made. So Secretary Ng, you're lucky enough to be here. You should make a reply here. The chairman is saying that we are being irrelevant and that we are targeting at you. You should make a response. So on the question of education, Mr. Eddie Ng, Secretary for Education, when we talk about the policy on international schools, the policy on tertiary institutions, there are problems. Chairman, when you criticize, you have to be well justified. The chief executive who picked Mr. Eddie Ng made it very clear. Perhaps the chief executive has some blind spots, and he has the obligation to remind the chief executive who selected him. Second, if the chief executive has given him the assignment and he doesn't do it, then there are problems. Or if both the CE and the Secretary for Education are not doing a good enough job, that's the third alternative, third likelihood. I get a feeling that Mr. Eddie doesn't really want to offer any advice to the chief executive. The CE said that the students in Hong Kong should be given a conducive environment for them to have an all-round kind of education. The international schools is one part of the equation. The Secretary for Education is very much in a rut. So is the chief executive. International schools are considered as some kind of an industry. It's just like the healthcare sector. The chief executive said, I mean, there was Donald Tsang at the time, and the chief executive said that we should not do so. Has Mr. Eddie Ng reminded the chief executive to be true to his manifesto? We'd like to see the manifesto being implemented, and that is through the provision of more university places, in particular all these university places funded by the UGC. Now, through the provision of more university places, more students in the relevant age cohort would be given the opportunity to be admitted to university. Now, Greedy Donald used the land, the money on the international schools, and he was squeezing the tertiary education. Chairman, if I don't dwell on the details, probably don't understand. Mr. Leung Kwok-hung, I think your point is well made. Now, the Baptist University would like to have a TCM center, and the government doesn't really show any intention to allow this. You haven't really indicated your stance, Mr. Wai-hing. I mean, the buck has been passed to Paul Chen, Secretary for Development. You have the obligation to make sure that the chief executive's dignity is preserved, and you have to make sure that the policy, the manifesto, is truly implemented. If this is not implemented now, at least you should come up with the direction. I think you are going in the opposite direction. How much of your pay do you want me to dock? I'm trying to dock your pay in many amendments. You haven't committed a hanging offense, but I am trying to ask members to say how much of Mr. Eddie Ng's pay should be docked. Or you may wish to stand up and say that you shouldn't have your pay docked. In universities, the City University, Mr. Si Wai-leung was the council chairman. He stepped down after he became the chief executive. The City University is a renowned institution. All these lecturers are hired on contract terms. They're not hired on permanent terms for a university to develop. I think you have digressed, Mr. Leung. Well, nothing is not a digression. There's nothing new under the sun. There is nothing new under the sun. I pause here. I yield the floor to other members. It is 12:05. Other than 4 members have spoken once. Now, all the other members have spoken on many occasions. Is there any member who hasn't spoken would like to speak? Well, does any member who hasn't spoken wish to speak? Yes, I do.
請議員返回座位。
Please be seated, members.
各位議員，我再問一次。
Members, let me put this to you again. We have started this debate for quite some time. We spent 5 hours, counting from last Thursday, or 4 hours on this debate. Within these 4 hours, Mr. Kwok-hung has spoken for 4 times. So let me put this to members. Does any member who hasn't quite spoken wish to speak?
而家未有咁。
If not, Dr. Fernando Zheng for the 3rd time. Chairman, thank you. Chairman, you've drawn a line there, and you have imposed a time limit. I just hope that you would be a little bit more liberal. This is indeed an opportunity for us to speak on the different heads which will be incorporated into the schedule. Indeed, it is our responsibility, our duty to monitor the administration. Please abide by Rules of Procedure 68.3 and speak to the subject. I refer to Head 156, 170 about the Social Welfare Department, if I may speak on these heads of expenditure. Now, just now I talked about the special education. Indeed, there are a couple of problems there. First of all, the positioning of the special schools. The government simply adopts this accounting methodology. The unit cost is so high, and the government has been trying to slash the cost. Given the changing demographics, students suffering from severe disability require special care, and we have 10 special schools in Hong Kong. They're experiencing a great deal of difficulties. They are running short of manpower. They cannot hire the carers. They cannot hire the nurses or therapists. They don't have enough resources. I heard from some principals that they are discouraging the parents from sending their kids there because the principals cannot guarantee good enough care for the kids. There was a court battle regarding one of the special schools, and this school hired some non-professional carers to provide specialist care, like the feeding of milk and so on. That's because they are running short of manpower. Despite this serious situation, the Education Bureau hasn't quite reviewed the situation and increased the manpower. In the funding allocation, the Education Bureau is sitting on a lot more resources than other bureaus. Every single year, the Education Bureau would not use up all the funding. Under Arthur Lee, there was a surplus of $3 billion. If the Education Bureau is not using up all the resources, it means that they are not optimizing the resources to take forward the public policies. I don't have to dwell too much on special education. In fact, education is something that would have a bearing on everybody, starting from pre-primary education. According to the manifesto of the chief executive, he would like to implement the free education, naive free education. In para 153, he said that there would be a committee to be formed to look into the possibility of providing free pre-primary education, and each student would be given an opportunity to receive quality kindergarten education. Chairman, this is very, very clear. he started talking about free 9-year primary 9-year education, and in his policy address, he immediately talked about setting up a committee to look into the possibility of free pre-primary education. We've received so many deputations, and 20-odd deputations reached a consensus with a signature of 50,000 people urging the Education Bureau to implement what C.Y. Leung pledged to do. But Mr. Wai-hing said that this committee is looking at the possibility of implementing this proposal. They merely are dealing with the likelihood and the likelihood of implementing this. I mean, this is a contradiction in terms. Now, you talked about actual implementation, and you start talking about the likelihood. And the secretary said that this would take us 2 years for the study to be completed. C.Y. Leung keeps talking about the speed, Hong Kong speed, Hong Kong momentum, and so on. And he's set up this committee, which will be sitting on the issue for another 2 years. This chief executive and also the Education Bureau under the stewardship of Mr. Wai-hing failed to show any commitment regarding pre-primary education. If children have special education needs, what's going to happen to them? They will be arranged to receive some early training, or if they are suffering from severe difficulties, they would be arranged to go to special centers.
But Chairman, these special centers have long queues. One would have to wait for 1 or even 2 years, depending on the district. From year 0 to 2, these children will get some assessment, but some of them will not be able to get assessment in that age period. Many of them will be assessed after they have reached 3, and then they will have to wait for early training or admission to special centers, and everything requires a waiting time of 1.5 years on average. Well, you have to talk about all these. I'm talking about pre-primary education. The Policy Bureau talk about early identification and early intervention. Well, yes, this is an approach espoused by every authority in the world. We need to identify these children early and give them suitable education. But now this is just a slogan. Actually, for those who are given places, they have already passed the so-called golden opportunity age. We've been talking about the age from 0 to 6 being the golden opportunity period. In that, if we can identify them early, suitable training and services can be provided to the children and their parents. But unfortunately, at present, the waiting time is so long. Some children will only start to get the necessary service after reaching the age of 5. This is really regrettable. All right, let's talk about tertiary instead of pre-primary education. These subvented university places has not really increased over the past 20 years. Last year, we were told that another 500 will be provided, and the total is 14,500. So nothing much changed over the past 20 years, and yet we talk about a knowledge-based economy and the need to train our young people to tie in with the economic development. We have been talking about improving people's future through education. But what about our investment in tertiary education? Why haven't we been able to increase the number of tertiary education places? Every year, thousands of qualified students do not get admitted to subvented tertiary education programs. Last year, more than 10,000 eligible students were turned away. Is it because of lack of funding? Well, we have a lot of money, and yet we denied our students suitable tertiary education. Instead, we open up the market. We open the market to privately run programs, associate degree programs, and the like. Of course, that's not the idea of Mr. Eddie Ng. It started in the last term of government. And now we have to face the problems, over-enrollment, indiscriminate enrollment, and so on. And now tertiary education is about profits, it's commercial. And these universities basically operate a diploma mill. They would admit anyone, whether the student is qualified or not, whether they have got sufficient teachers or not. And now recognition of their qualification is a big problem. The responsibility of this mess rests with the Education Bureau. We must make sure that our tertiary institutions can train the people we need. And now it's just a big market. Education is now turned into commercial commodities. So I have a big concern here for incorporating this head. If we don't give the money to the Education Bureau, then these school sponsoring bodies will not be able to do their job. But if I agree to the funding, the Bureau is not doing a proper job. And what the Bureau does is just to turn these into commercial operations. We have people managing the universities and university professors subvented by public funds. And indirectly, we are allowing these universities to run self-finance or for-profit courses. Their presidents and senior management people are all paid by public money. Their salary, their remuneration package are all funded by public money. And we're not talking about small sums. Take Polytechnic University as an example. I worked there. According to a previous Audit Commission report, the president was paid $360,000 a month. He received a higher pay than the CE. That's how we spend our money, public money. And in the universities, they also open and organize private companies. And these companies incurred huge losses. And management was chaotic. So how were they monitored? These institutions should be responsible to the Education Bureau, and the Education Bureau should be responsible for their supervision. And in some of the money would also go to the CPU. Originally, the CPU provided some funding for public policy research. It was entrusted to the RGC, Research Grant Council. That is an internationally recognized approach whereby an intermediary is entrusted with the funding of public policy research so that there will be no bias or favoritism. Now the CPU has taken back the funding power without any prior negotiation with the RGC. How can this be allowed? Why didn't the UGC say something about this? Mr. Raymond Chan, I have 2 points of order. You asked whether members who haven't spoken would like to speak. What are you going to do after that? And that's the first point. And also, how many opportunities do I still have to give my speech? I want to speak on more than 3 hats. How many times you are allowed to speak would depend on how many other members who would like to speak. If there are members who haven't spoken so far, they will be given priority. Because I've noted that this morning, so far, we have just got half an hour left. I would like to have more members who haven't spoken given the opportunity to speak. I can't tell you how many more times you'll be allowed to speak. Of course, I'll give priority to others who haven't spoken. But if you've got very important issues that you must air, please be organized and deliver those speeches appropriately. Okay, in order to do that, I'll ask for a quorum call. I want to seek your advice. You want me to speak in accordance with Rule 68, and that is to talk about the policies. So what's wrong if I say I want to dock Mr. Eddie Ng's pay because he hasn't implemented the policies? It must have something to do with the services supported by the proposed funding provision. Let's say pre-primary education policy is inappropriate. The services provided under the policy on pre-primary education do not warrant the financial provision in the budget. You can speak on these, and you must argue why it's reasonable to withhold the funding. But if we are talking about the pay of any official, as we have indicated, we don't have any policy or the practice of delineating the pay of an official in accordance with his performance. We don't have this function. This is not a function given us by the basic law. But you say that because of some education policy, everyone in Hong Kong who has ever been involved in the policy, or you want to talk about what you did in the past. That would be disproportionate. Well, you have omitted something here. In the past, the senior officials were not politically appointed. There was no accountability. They were civil servants. I cannot talk their pay. And now they're on contract terms. Well, I'm not talking about the past. Those rules were old rules. Well, I'm talking about the basic law and the existing body of laws and our rules of procedures. We don't have this function. We have the power to question and to examine any head in the budget. Please carefully look at the relevant provisions and also the amounts under the relevant heads. Actually, Ms. N. Zhang raised this, and she was correct. We should not be talking about the details of the heads in this debate. If I want to talk his pay and I cannot be talk about the details or subheads, how? Mr. Kwok-hung, please speak in accordance with the rules of procedure. Well, we have time. That's why I want to seek your advice. Otherwise, you shouldn't approve the amendments to reduce their pay. Well, this is not the time for a debate with me. Well, if you didn't approve the amendments, then everything will be okay. But you approve those amendments, then I have to explain why I want to dock his pay. I can't say that I don't like him or people don't like him. Please look at the rules of procedure and also the amendments that you submitted for my approval. We talk about a particular figure, and that is to reduce a certain head, a figure related to a certain head. But if I want to dock his pay and I cannot talk about his performance, how can I achieve that amendment? We will have no problem if you disallow the proposed amendment, but you approve it. Mr. Raymond Chan, can I defer to Mr. Leung Yiu-chung, who hasn't spoken so far? Mr. Leung Yiu-chung. Thank you, Chairman, and also thank you, Mr. Chan. I want to talk about Head 15 144, if I am not mistaken, as Secretary for Labor and Welfare. The reason why I don't think this should be incorporated is that I don't know whether the chairman is familiar with the employment ordinance. 141? Yes, head 141. Sorry, I was wrong. Sorry, it's 141. I don't know if the chairman is familiar with the employment ordinance. The ordinance provides that certain employees will get protection by the ordinance, and that is you have to work for at least 4 days in a week and not fewer than 18 hours a week before you are qualified for the protection. But there are many part-time employees who fail to notch up the necessary hours, and they are not entitled to sick leave allowance, long-term, long service or pay for holidays. So they get very unreasonable treatment, these part-time employees. We have asked the Secretary for Labor and Welfare to amend the law for a long time so as to protect these part-time employees. These part-time employees are treated like this. They will be getting 17 hours of employment every 4 days, and so they will not qualify under the employment ordinance. It's very unreasonable. We have asked the Bureau, we have asked the Secretary to do away with this discrimination so that these so-called casual workers will get the protection. But the Labor and Welfare Bureau has talked about one study after another or one survey after another. We were told that in the middle of this year something would be announced, but so far nothing. The administration has been adopting a tactic of procrastination and feet dragging, and it's believed that hundreds of thousands of employees have been denied the protection under the ordinance, 30,000 of them.
Well, the regulation requires an urgent review, but nothing is going to happen. So we have to say that the Labor and Welfare Bureau is not right in doing this. Is it relevant to this particular head? Well, they're going to get the money. But if they're not delivering their service, they shouldn't get the money. Therefore, I'm saying that it should not be included. It's not a matter of not getting sufficient resources or not having the manpower. Rather, it's a question of absence of direction, absence of policies. So if we continue to give them the money, it is a waste of money. You shouldn't get the money. Another point is that it is very close to our heart, and that's the standard working hours. Mr. Chairman, as you know that the working class are very concerned about the question of standard working hours. But then recently, it seems that the government has done something about it. That is the setting up of a committee to look into the question of whether there should be legislation for standard working hours. So it's not a matter of legislating for standard working hours. Rather, it just looks at the question of whether it should be legislated. Well, the long working hours are having a very serious effect on the employed. Now, on the 1st of May, you know what day it was. There's the Labour's Day. Mr. Chairman, do you know about the origin of the Labor Day? We know about the origin of other days, like or other festivals, like Christmas celebrates the birth of Christ, and Easter we celebrate the resurrection of Christ. Now, for Labor Day, time and again we have asked the Secretary for Labour and Welfare to explain the origin of Labour Day, but all along he has kept silent, and he's kept his silence, and he rejects to explain the origin of International Labour Day. But in fact, 100 or 200 years ago in Chicago, in the USA, over 100 workers came out to fight for their interests. There was a confrontation, and the police killed many workers. To remember them, we call 1st of May as International Labour Day. What's the relevance? I'm coming to it. What was asked for was the 3 H's. That is 8 hours work, 8 hours rest, and 8 hours learning. So even back in those days, they had the idea of standard working hours. In other words, 8 hours a day. Currently, yes, we have a public holiday for Labour Day. Every year, we saw the SLW celebrating Labour Day on the stage together with other trade union leaders. But he never told us about the original objectives of having Labour Day. But in fact, it's important to remember the idea of having 8 hours work a day. I think he doesn't want to face the problem. He doesn't want to face the issue of standard working hours. Well, Mr. Leung, if you say that because SLW refuses to state the origin of Labour Day, and so he should get a pay cut, don't you think that the relevance is too thin? I haven't finished, Mr. Chairman. So when the administration set up the committee to look into the question of standard working hours, I think they are not interested in legislating for it. They just asked the committee to see whether there should be legislation. How long would they need to study the matter? Dr. Chiu-hung chairs the committee. He says that he would need 3 years. Now, for this term government, the current year has already passed half. We are 6 months into 2013. So 3 years down the road, that would be near the end of the current term. Even if there is a recommendation to legislate for it, it has to come back to this LegCo. There will be further consultation. I just doubt very much as to whether we get a piece of legislation for standard working hours. So again, like the 418 policy, the LWB is procrastinating. It doesn't want to face the issue. So, Chairman, if you see something like this, there is a strong request for standard working hours, and yet the LWB is always dragging the feet, then do you think that we should appropriate money for the Bureau? I don't think so. And then, as I have said, you don't need more manpower or more resources to develop the policy. It's a matter of deciding on the policy direction. If the administration can clearly tell the committee that the question before them is how to legislate for standard working hours, then it will be a much simpler job, and you don't need to drag on for 3 years. If you have a compressed timetable, I would say that within the term of this government, work would have been completed. However, the way I see is that both the Bureau as well as the Secretary do not seem to share such a goal and has no intention to do so, and have no intention to do so. In other words, they are not being responsive to our aspirations, and therefore I don't think we should allocate money to the Bureau. They shouldn't get the public resources to spend. Other than the standard working hours, there's also one other important issue, and that's about work injuries. Well, every year we see a worsening of the problem. We have many projects that are hard-pressed for time, and so many workers are suffering from industrial accidents. there are both fatalities as well as injuries, and the figures are going up. I hope the Bureau will do something about it. The 28th of April should be set aside to remember work injuries, and there should be a plaque to remember the dead and the injured. This is also going to act as a reminder for us to have a higher sense of work safety. And then workers will be protected from work injuries and work fatalities. Unfortunately, time and again, the Bureau is not going to face the problem squarely and will ignore our requests. Again, it doesn't require more money. It doesn't require more resources. What we are hoping for is a policy from the government, and yet the administration doesn't want to face it. Therefore, like the previous two issues, I just fail to see how we should include the head of expenditure so that it get more money to deal with the issues. And therefore, I cannot agree to the inclusion of this head, so I speak. Mr. Raymond Chen. Mr. Chairman, I would like to talk about Head 156, the head for education. Since we've got Mr. Edding, the Secretary for Education here, so I want to talk about education. Now, John Zhang has said that we're the key man, and in fact, the government's like a safe locked without the key. But in fact, even if we open the safe, even if we unlock the safe, we have no control over how the money is to be spent. Now, we want to say that they should spend the public money in a better way. We went to talk to John Zhang. He regarded us as robbers armed with a knife. Well, I think the way he sees it is that there should be a policy, and then the FS will try to come up with a proposed amount of money so as to discharge the duty. We are now criticizing the budget. John Zhang doesn't see any problem because he isn't the protagonist. He says that the government is the locked safe without a key, and even if he opens it, he can't have a say about it. Now, when we talk about the inclusion of the head of expenditure, we shouldn't just look at the budget. We should also look at three other things. The CE electoral platform, his policy address, and then the budget. And then we can see a scaling down. We can't put all the blame on Edding, but of course he's politically accountable. He has to sit here to listen to us. However, we should look at the policy of the policy address of C.Y. Leung. 7 major issues, 5 main points, 25 promises. Well, it sounds grand. Early education, primary education, secondary education, tertiary education. When it comes to policy education, 7 paragraphs, including special education, 7 paragraphs, a mere 7 paragraphs. When compared with his manifesto, it's quite different. All the earlier promises have disappeared. We don't see them anymore. Now, coming to the budget. 17 paragraphs are about education. However, for the entire share, when compared with the revised estimate, we see a decrease of 12.4%. Is it because of the poor popularity rating of Edding? I think for the budget, it is an exercise to grapple for the money. Now, at the end of the day, for Mr. Ng's share, yes, it's quite a big share among the other departments and bureaus, but you really have to admit that it is a small amount. Now, I think you are spending the money in the wrong area. You are not putting the money in areas that need the money. Let me go from one to another. Early education. Wai Leung has promised free early education. Under the Education Commission, there should be a working group to be set up so that the stakeholders would look at how non-profit making kindergartens will be subsidized, in particular the teachers' pay. Now, in the policy address, it says that the Bureau would set up a working group to look at the feasibility of this issue and come up with specific recommendations. What about the budget? Now, for free kindergarten education, it doesn't get a mention at all. And then for 15 years, free education again, it is no longer mentioned. What about primary, secondary school education? I think in the manifesto, teachers' workload should be reduced, more administrative support, and better class-teacher ratio so the teachers can develop their career. There should be limited small class teaching. So they got a lot of praises. Of course, at that time, he had not revealed his true self. It's no longer there in the policy address. What about the budget? Once again, we don't see any provision for such purposes. Let's look back to the previous decade's history. Students suffer from it. Teachers suffer from the educational policies. Even the administrative support is heavily strained. What about tertiary education? For tertiary education, they said that they have to review the role of the UGC. There should be more research opportunities for young scholars. Scholars should be encouraged to be more socially minded. It is absent from the policy address, and then the CPU has got $20 million, and that's supposed to do research about public policies, and it has been taken back from the RGC. So again, when compared with the electoral platform, we see regress, not progress. And then we have $480 million. It came as a surprise. The elite students will be subsidized to go overseas to study for early education. And then the SARG scholarship fund will be given $480 million more. The scholarship holders will have to come back to work for 2 years. I think New People's Party was behind the idea. I think they don't quite support it now. We rejected the idea. It's not that we are opposing for opposition's sake. It's not a matter of why they should go overseas, why they should study for teaching. Now, what if they can't get a teaching post? Do they have to repay the loan or the money? So again, you can see that when we talk about giving money to a fund, it seems that work has already been done, substantive work has been done, substantial work has been done. And $480 million is a huge sum. But it seems that it hasn't been carefully developed. Yes, this has been said many, many times, but still we have to talk about it. I hope the Bureau can listen to us. We'll hear what we are talking about, and then they won't have so much window dressing. And then what's more is that, again, it is related to his electoral manifesto. All the CE candidates said that they would not allow outsiders to lead the Bureau. And today, we see what has happened. I won't talk about deducting his pay. That has been disapproved. Now, we are talking about inclusion of the head of expenditure. We want to take it out. Now, Wai Leung has said that the policy address is the policy roadmap for 5 years, and the budget is to implement his plan. But then in the budget, we just don't quite see how, with a smaller sum of money, they're going to deliver a lot. So when we have another CE election, please don't have any confidence in the electoral platform. Now, there were a lot of promises. in the election platform of C.Y. Leung. Since Eddie Ng is here, so I will just talk about it now. Meeting adjourned and will resume at 2 p.m. tomorrow.